Hi there. This is Dr. Tom Knotts, and I would like to talk to you today on the subject of doppelgangers, or what are called doublegangers. Um, First thing I want to do is define what it is, and I'll give you an example. During the time of the French Revolution, a countess was escaped and made to Germany with her physician. And during the celebration of a party, as they were all gathered there and enjoying a ballroom setting, the physician was talking about how people could be split brained and how you could have two people. He didn't call it split brain, but how you could have a double ganger or a twin inside of you. And the people, thought he was out of his mind. And while in mid sentence, he simply looked at the countess that he was with. And while she was in mid sentence, he raised his hand, looked her in the eyes, and snapped his fingers. And she switched in mid sentence from speaking French to speaking German. She took on a totally different body characteristic. Instead of being conserved and ladylike, she became very, shall we say, out forward, approaching men, and began dancing in ways that were unfamiliar with everybody else. She became quite the show. She was basically highly seductive and not the same person. He let that go on for a little while and walked up to her, looked her in the eyes, and snapped his fingers, and she switched back to an elegant lady and couldn't understand why she had brandy in her hand, and she had no memory of anything that had happened. A doppelganger literally was called a double ganger because it means two that are joined together from the same life source, the ganger. And double or doppel means an extra one. Well, the way that a doppelganger is and I'm going to explain it by how it's created. When an infant prior to the age of 10 months of age, or yeah, 10 months prior to that, it's unable to pass out. If an infant is put through trauma, abuse, psychological, sexual, physical, but primarily physical and sexual, the brain is unable to pass out or disassociate. And since it cannot disassociate, what it does is it splits the brain and it creates what's called bi-camerility, to where it will split the brain instead of primarily living on one side and functioning from one side. It splits the life force at the base where the infant is and now creates two trees of energy. Now, the brain always wants to be balanced. Just like if you get out on a ship or you go to balance something, you want the weight to be equal so it's not completely given over to one side or the other. The brain always seeks for balance. So, from what happens at this point forward, is the person will become black and white in their thinking. Now, black and white thinking creates what is also called bipolar disorder, except when it's not through a doppelganger or splitting of the life essence, it's bipolar disorder. And that's because they'll have an emotional surge that will take them down to the pits of depression for, 7 to 14 days. They'll have 3 days in which they come out of it, and then they'll be rising up for about a 2 week period to a euphoria, and then they'll begin the gradual and sometimes plummeting descent back into despair. Well, that's if they don't have that split at the base. But when they have that split at the base, from that point forward, all the good things in life that are out in the open will be stored on the positive side, the white side, which would be the presenting conscience for the majority of the time. And then you'll have the dark side or the evil side. One will be good, one will be bad. Now, here's the thing, as good as one side is, the opposite side will be that much worse. So, there'll be a balance. If this is a lover of life and feeds the animals, this will be evil to animals, will starve the animals. It creates a complete opposite effect, bipolar opposite. So, what'll happen is that they will be usually on a switching station because the brain wants both sides to be active. And so, I've worked with many people in the last 35 years of being a counselor, a psychologist, that have had doppelgangers. I remember a case that was referred to me by because I used to be a federal state chaplain, and I would train sheriffs and correctional facilities and officers, and I would train chaplains. And I remember a department once calling me about a person, and it was a female, and they had arrested her. But when she basically woke up in the cell the next morning, she had no idea how she got there, why she was there. They thought she was faking at first, but she literally didn't. She had given them a different name that night when they arrested her. So they checked her background and found out that, because they detained her, that she had a psychological profile of schizophrenia. Well, she wasn't a schizophrenic. One of the officers on order thought she was demonized. And so they referred her to me, and not on the books, but he talked to her as he's releasing her. He gave her one of my cards, said, "Why don't you call this guy? He really knows a lot. He can probably help you through this." Well, what would happen is she would go to bed around 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and then that body would wake up, and it would be the opposite side, the twin. Now, here's the deal. The human brain is similar to that of whales, aquatic mammals, and a few other species like walruses and such, to whereas like a dolphin, most people don't realize, but the reason why dolphins and whales don't drown is 25% of their brain stays awake, and it goes in a counterclockwise fashion, with this hemisphere being awake, then this here taking over. And as it rolls, the next one goes asleep. So what happens is one side of the brain will go completely to sleep, the good side, and the other one will then wake up. They'll get out of bed. They don't even know the other person that's inside of them. Neither side knows the other. And so they'll get dressed up, and it's very common for them to be highly sexual. They have a lack of morality, the dark side, but the good side will be extremely moral, have extremely close ties with trying to maintain their integrity and such. I remember working with a man in the prison system who's, when I talked to him, he says, "I don't know why I'm in jail." He says, "I had to have been set up." He said, "I woke up in front of a store, and I had a bag of guns laying next to me, and he says, I don't know how I got there. There was glass all around me." He says, "Somebody must have knocked me out or drugged me and put me there." Well, he had a criminal record that was pretty big. He said this has happened several times, and he felt like, somebody was doing this to him. Well, he switched in the jail. Now, this man was about 5'4", but he was built thicker than a silverback gorilla. He was so dangerous that they chained him continuously from the wrists to the waist to the feet, and then chained him to the floor. I had to go to a special room to meet with him, because he would do 1,200 push-ups and 1,200 sit-ups every early morning, every night. He was insanely strong. He had no idea. He was the nicest guy. He was probably one of the nicest people I've ever met in jail. But I switched him. And when I switched him, I switched from the left to the right side of the brain. He went like this, and he looked up, and he looked at me with cold-blooded killer eyes. And he spoke to me, and I had told the guards to wait outside, and they wanted to stay in. They insisted, but I got approval from the warden. At that moment, I was hoping that they would come back in, because I did not know if the chains would hold this man. He had a doppelganger, and it was a powerful. It was a martial artist. It was a killer who had been through the war, and he maintained his body in incredible shape. Shape like I've never seen on anybody else, even a Shaolin priest. I began working with him, and I found out that he had come from a highly abusive satanic background. So what happens is, to create a doppelganger, they split that life force. To say that the evil side will be demonized is an understatement, because it will give itself over to the demonic empowerment, not willingly or knowingly, but when you're being tortured, raped, sodomized, or extremely abused. And this happens in witchcraft and Satanism and the occult. It also happens in Masonic lines. They dedicate those children and all the Eastern Star, they dedicate their children unto devils for all time and eternity, and their children's children and all their descendants. And so these entities will enter in. And what happens is it creates the two different sides, and it's called the evil twin. Now, the demonic has to be bound or separated from the person in order to help them. And they call it crossing the rainbow bridge because the color spectrum of light, each color has a certain wave frequency. And you can sometimes go under like this, or you can go over with a rainbow. If you go under, it's just a white light crossing over at the brainstem or crossing over through the rear over to the other side. Now, there will be a permanent barrier in place to try to keep you from crossing over. But the power of God prevails. And if they give you permission to pray for them with authority, in proxy, you can cross over. And when you do, realize the good side will go to sleep. You cannot bind a doppelganger because it's not the demon making the decisions, it's the doppelganger. What you can do is pray and ask God to have angels hold it. I had a doppelganger come forward on me once, and before I could say it, before I could respond, that person had come out of the chair around the desk and grabbed me by the throat and pinned me up out of my chair by my throat. And they were powerful. I mean, insanely strong. And with the breath I had, I cried out and asked God to have angels hold it. And God will answer your prayer, and angels will hold that person back to keep them from killing you. I had another one switch on me, a doppelganger, and they snuck into the church. I don't know how. It was locked. And they had been in the military formerly. They were really skilled. And I kept my office door open, and I'm leaning down, and all of a sudden I felt weird, and I look up. And right there, that person had already came through the door and was coming around the office and had a literal razor blade knife this long. Not a knife like this, but literally a straight razor knife. And they were going to take me out because they didn't like the idea that I was making the other person aware. So a doppelganger is a very dangerous thing to work with. It is the evil twin. And what it means is that child, that person had been severely hurt prior to the age of 10 months. So to sum it up, it's the life force is split through trauma, creates a good side, a light side, an evil side, a dark side. They will switch usually at night. Neither side will know the other. And the doppelganger cannot be bound because it is a human, not a demon. It may have demonization, but it's willingly. So I hope this helps you to understand what a doppelganger is. And the reason why I was teaching on this is not only because of questions about a person was describing a doppelganger, and so I told them I'd just make a video about it. So Lord bless you, and I hope this helps you to understand the psychology of the mind and what bi-camerility is. Bi-camerility is when you have two independent, autonomous brain sides, the left and the right side working autonomously and independently on their own. And I'll give you one more example. And this is in the psychology manual. So if you've gotten a master's or a doctorate in personality disorders, you'll be familiar with this, but most people aren't. During the Vietnamese War, there was a man who was on post, and they had put him into the front. And basically, what happened is the next morning, when in the middle of the night, he was put on shift at 2 a.m. At 6, when he was getting relieved, they couldn't find him. So they waited until light, and what they did find was a a trail of Vietnamese soldiers that had been mutilated, bashed in their skulls, not shot, sliced up. They found him leaning against a tree covered in blood with several Vietnamese around him. He didn't know how he got there. His gun was broken into pieces. His knife had been used quite a bit. He had no idea how he got there. He was covered in blood. Well, he had a doppelganger. When they brought him back, they found that inside his brain, he had a twin. And it was an undeveloped twin, which brings us to another aspect. You can always have a doppelganger through gametization, or where you have two eggs fertilized, one digests the other one in the womb, but it doesn't completely digest it, and it takes a portion or a place within the anatomical structure. And as a result, it will grow and it will be attached to the spiritual aspect. Nerves carry the spirit. And so what they found is he had a part that would wake up at night. It couldn't speak, but it could kill. It was very good at killing. It didn't know how to shoot a gun. It had never been shown. So it used it as a blunt weapon, but it could use a knife. All right. All right. That's Dr. Knotson. I will talk to you later. Have a great day, and Lord bless you.